the dancer.
Oh, yeah.
She used to teach it at Oregon State, you know, that was in the before time. But yeah, and then I fill up a large space. Okay, they're feeding back, so I get to hear myself. That's we're okay now?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm John McCardle, I'm Mayor of Independence.
Natasha Adams, the Director of the Heritage Museum.
Patrick Baddeley, the Library Director here.
Sean Irvine, Economic Development Director.
Nancy Lodge, former city councilor for the City of Independence.
Kathy Martin Wells, City Councilor.
Jessica Porter, Community Member. Kate Swarzler, City Councilor.
Ryan Garrison, committee member. Marilyn Morton, Council President.
Bill Boisvert, Committee Member.
Gerald Fisher, Public Works Director.
Bob Mason, Police Chief.
Ken West, City Manager.
Rob Moody, Contract Finance Officer for the city.
Aaron Tyler, community member.
Shannon Core, City Councilor.
Nathan Christensen, committee member, and point of order, I need to disclose my wife works for the city.
As an hourly employee, yes. Thank you.
Sarah Joe, City Council.
Dory Shaw, citizen, committee member.
Amanda Christensen, HR Director.
Jason Kistler, IT director.
Karen Johnson, City Recorder.
Okay, so I have a couple things I can get us started with. We have to elect both a chair and a secretary. And who was our chair last, Dory, were you our chair last year? Does anybody else want to be chair? Does everybody want Dory to do it again?
Yes.
Any objection to Dory doing it again?
Does Dory have any objections?
This is your last chance to get me as chair because it's time for new blood. This will be my 9th year, so time for me to find another department to spend my time.
I think you should be chair.
There you go. Any, without objection? Okay, so ordered. The next thing, we have to have a secretary. Now, this is the greatest job ever, because all the secretary has to do is make sure that Karen did it. That's all it is. Who wants to be the secretary? Kathy, will that?
Because I know Karen will do it.
There you go.
Wow.
Is there objection to Kathy being the secretary for the budget committee? Without objection, that is the way it is. So Dory, I'm going to turn this over to you. You have the agenda in front of you, and onward and upward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so review of agenda and the budget calendar. Has everybody had a chance to look at page 1? Any changes? Additions? All right, the second page in the first packet is your minutes. On front and back there, if you haven't had a chance to review them, review them right now. On the little staple packet. And open for a motion of approval.
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion, do we have discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. All right, it looks like previous meeting, so we did that. Minutes, boom, done, done, done. Educational presentation video, number 6 on the agenda.
Karen, are we ready to go? Just about, we're working on it. So this is a video that I like to show before a budget meeting. It's a little bit older now, but it was done by the Oregonian, and it is a really good overview of Measure 5 and Measure 50. So other than those people that have heard me talk about Measure 5 and Measure 50 43,000 times, has anyone else heard of Measure 5 and 50? Yeah. Sean, you've heard it 43,000 times. Did you not? You heard it, Sean? So Measure 5 and Measure 50 have affected cities significantly, and we'll be talking about that later in the day. But this gives a great overview of those two measures, how we got there, and then we'll talk about where we are because of that. And I can keep talking. Should we make it bigger? Thank you, Karen. So from that, first of all, any questions?
Can we get the link?
Yes, we will send you the link. I'm gonna make a note. So a couple of things. Measure 5 and Measure 50 affect only the general fund, right? And you can see I did a little visual, and I am not an artist at all. I should have had Natasha or Sean or somebody do it. So, I'm just saying. It affects just the general fund and how those funds come in. It does not affect our enterprise or restricted funds, which is pretty much everything else. And now I'm gonna ask you, what departments are in the general fund?
Police department.
Police? Pick you, you don't count. Police,
Administration.
administration,
Library.
mhm,
Museum.
museum,
Public Works.
Gerald. No,
Public Works.
that's a, that.
Finance.
Yep, finance.
City recorder.
City recorder is part of administration and included in general fund. What do you think about parks?
Yeah.
General fund. Building inspections, general fund. What about Sean's department? General fund. Jason's department, general fund. Court, general fund. Facilities and planning, general fund. All of those departments are affected by Measure 5 and Measure 50 and how much tax revenue we receive. And with 5 and 50 in place for almost 30 years, there's been a pretty big effect. And we'll talk about that a little later. So as we go through, I want you to think about those departments that are within the general fund and keep them separate from the revenue generating funds, which is Gerald. And Sean has one. And on my little board up there, you'll see sewer has a $sign, water has a $sign, storm has a $sign. Tourism and events, that's Sean's, is one revenue generating. So as we work through this and we talk about this, you saw with 5 and 50, tax rate went down 10% and then only 3% per year. As we watch inflation and what we pay, it is much more than 3% every year since 1995. So that impact statewide, at the very first time that they dropped that 10%, the statewide reduction in property tax was over $51 million for 1 year. And then the tax rate only going up 3% with inflation and costs going up significantly more than that has resulted in, and this is something that I swept from League of Oregon Cities because it so perfectly reflects what's happening. It's resulted in the slow but steady strangulation of city finances as costs increase far faster than revenues and the community's demands for services increase. So that is kind of a recap of 5 and 50. And I can present the budget message, Chair, if you would like.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so a couple of housekeeping things on the budget message. First, this was a team effort. I asked Bob, when our finance director was recruited away, to become the budget officer. So Bob, Gerald, and I created the original proposed document. Then we were fortunate enough to get Rob to come in and check all of the underlying calculations, review all of our assumptions. He had it formatted and printed so that it was ready for you tonight. And speaking of formatting, as we were going through all of our changes and changing it from landscape to portrait, which you all requested, yay, we had a little glitch in our page numbering system. We'll get that fixed for the final. So this time the pages are going to be a little wonky. Just kind of go with the flow on it and we'll get it fixed. And then Emmanuel created the cover, which I think is absolutely beautiful. What we're going to do each year is on the cover, we're going to focus on a project or event that we accomplished together over the past year. This year it was the F Street Bridge. And you'll see from this picture that it was a very important project. Other changes, I will go through and I will read the budget message. I do this because it's an important document that is missed and often overlooked, but it provides a guide to the budget and an explanation of what's proposed and why, but I don't just read it. As I'm going through it, I'm going to make comments, and this is a living, breathing document, and I'm going to try and make it a living, breathing document to you and to our community. We were asked to make it easier and more understandable, and I'm hoping that helps. So, with all of that said, we are off with the budget message. So,
Follow along on page 6.
thank you, Bob. Group effort here. We present the proposed fiscal year 2023-24 budget for your review and approval. This balanced budget reflects the effects of the post-pandemic economy, an increase in inflation and resultant increases in cost, continued refinement of changes in best practices, and the effects of nearly 30 years of suppressed revenue in the general fund due to State Measure 5 and Measure 50. The infusion of federal funding through the American Rescue Plan Act aided the city's provision of services and strengthened budget in fiscal year 2023. Without that infusion of federal funding for fiscal year 24, and with the negative impacts noted above, fiscal year 2024 will be a year of contraction for the city's general fund. Although the general fund is in contraction, the city's overall financial position remains relatively stable. So I want to repeat that. Although the general fund is in contraction, the rest of the city is overall relatively stable. That said, increasing costs, which exceed revenue streams in the general fund, continue to limit the resources available to provide services to the community. We are faced with continued supply chain issues, increased personnel costs due to a required compensation class and equity study, which we will talk about later, and a general inflationary environment. For these reasons, we have taken a conservative approach, moderated our assumptions, and reduced personnel and services while also working to sustain as much as possible quality services with limited resources.
And does equity in that sentence refer to pay equity?
Yes, it does. And that was required in 2017, and I think it was House Bill 2005. So we talked a little bit about the board, the general fund, restricted funds, and revenue generating funds. And I want to make very clear that most of our funds are restricted in some way or another. So you'll notice the general fund has dashes. That's because money can go out of the general fund really easily. It can go anywhere. The others aren't dashed. Those are solid lines. That's because moving money from those is harder. They're restricted. You have to have special, an interfund loan, or special reasons for doing it. They do not go out as easily. And as was requested by our community and the budget committee and the council, we are working on reducing our debt and those interfund loans. So you will see fewer and fewer interfund loans between those restricted funds. And again, revenue generating funds are the funds that have a consistent revenue stream that are not related to taxes, which is why grants I don't consider a revenue fund because it's not consistent. So we have water, sewer, storm, those are all rates or ratepayer consistent revenue. And then we have tourism and events, which is our transient occupancy lodging tax. So on to status of council goals. The Vision 2040 process was completed in spring 2020 after significant public engagement. In April 2023, the council adopted the City of Independence City Council goals for 23-25. The council developed these goals in alignment with the city's 2040 vision and other guiding plans and city services. Aligning around the vision honors the previous work that was completed, as well as the community and staff voices that were involved in those processes. The Vision 2040 is foundational to establishment of the City Council's 2023-2025 goals and the proposed budget was created to support those goals and priorities, which are listed below. Parks and Recreation, including a Parks Master Plan, an inventory of recreation programs, services, and opportunities, and engaging the community and partners in discussions around development of the old pool facility location. And our council heard about the preliminary work on that. So we're already moving forward on these goals as much as we can. And you'll notice that each of the narratives by the department heads will relate back to these goals, because these are our marching orders. This is what you have told us we need to be doing. This is what our community has told us we need to be doing. Fiscal sustainability, including completion of infrastructure master plans and rate analysis, and improved communication of the city budget to include review of revenue and expenditures. And that is what we're working on now by trying to create this living document that everyone understands. And of course, Gerald's stuff. They're going to talk about it a little later. Housing, including completion of the housing needs analysis and update of the development code to allow for a more diverse housing options. Community engagement, including increased engagement and focused education on homelessness resources, increased community participation at city events, and a focus on bringing more people downtown, increased education curriculum and programming at the library and museum, and increased community education and engagement with city government to include exploration of opportunities for community leadership programs. Now, we're already in talks with folks regarding that community leadership program, and you will see a lot more of that coming in the next year. And I really want you to know on community engagement, there is a high level of work to be done in communications, and this becomes important when we start talking later. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Economic development, including the completion of the Central Townage Plan, securing funding for designs to extend utilities to industrial property, and convening partners for workforce development. And here I want to note that just last night, we announced that we received the notice to proceed on the Central Townage Plan. So we are already moving forward on that, although we have a couple years or more before that'll be done. And then as far as workforce, again, we're already looking at what you've asked of us and started. So a smaller project would be that sidewalk repair program that we were talking about and creating workforce for our youth. And then going on, transportation, including evaluation of the success of My Trolley, and it found successful securing ongoing funding, securing funding for the Chestnut Street Bridge and the Mountain First Southern Arterial, and securing approval of an at-grade rail crossing for the Southern Arterial. And I will tell you, we are working on that now. And that is a lot of heavy work. And the mayor is over there laughing because it is a lot of heavy work that we are doing. Although these are the 6 highest priorities set by the council for 2023-2025, staff will continue to work toward achieving additional council and community goals found within the Vision 2040 document. So now I'm going to move into changes in operations. One of the goals in the Vision 2040 is to ensure that the public dollars are wisely and prudently spent. And for us, particularly in budgeting, that is a goal that we try to follow. So while the influx of federal funds via the American Rescue Plan Act was welcome, these one-time funds created significant fluctuations that made it harder to see the base budget for fiscal year 2023 last year, particularly the general fund, and ensure that it was sustainable. As we progressed through fiscal year 23, it became clear that the general fund is in fact not sustainable without an alternative revenue stream. The city is continuing to move forward with the implementation of the newest best practices begun in fiscal year 2023, which includes the allocation of staff time to funds based on actual allocation calculations. Those allocation calculations, just so you know, can be found on page 92, and it tells you exactly which job is allocated to which place. Some of us, like me, I'm allocated throughout because I work for all of the departments in all of the areas. Some people are 100% general fund. The implementation of a new module within the city's financial and payroll software allows city staff to allocate their hours in real time to appropriate funds and costs incurred by development. This will provide management with the ability to look back on an annual basis and accurately update the calculation allocations personnel services in each fund. So each year, we can better and better allocate appropriately. This year, we're creating a new department. We're adding a facilities and vehicles maintenance and repair department. This department is housed within Public Works. Although it is a general fund, it is housed within Public Works, is tasked with maintaining all city-owned vehicles and buildings, facilities, except for the Public Works building. The maintenance supervisor position is a repurposed position that was formerly housed in the police department as facility maintenance. The maintenance assistant position is a part-time position that was formerly housed in Public Works. The Facilities and Vehicles Maintenance and Repair Department, number 215, is in lieu of the prior Equipment, Vehicle, and Reserve Fund 115, and the funds held in Fund 115 have been transferred to the Facilities and Vehicles Maintenance and Repair Department. We did this because we have these beautiful buildings, and the last thing we want is for our beautiful buildings to deteriorate around us. So by having a true facilities and maintenance manager who can look out a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we can better budget for the use of our funds to maintain these facilities, so we're not 20 or 30 years down the road with this building falling down around us. Personnel. In 2017, the Oregon legislature passed House Bill 2005, which provides that employers, including cities, cannot discriminate between employees on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, marital status, or age in the payment of wages. The city had not undergone a class compensation and equity study with a focus on the requirements of House Bill 2005. Therefore, that study was performed after I came in the fall of 2022. I want to know, because this is kind of a thing for me, and so y'all get to hear it because I get to talk. This is basically an unfunded mandate. The state said, you will do this, but they didn't give us any money to do it. So we had come up with the money for the consultants, and then we had to figure out how we're going to implement this with no money coming down. So do what we say, but we're not going to give you any money to do it. Not that I'm bitter. No discrimination was found, which is fabulous. But the study did find that city personnel across the board were being paid less than employees in similar jobs in comparable jurisdictions. The increases recommended by the CC&E affect all funds, but the general fund in particular was adversely affected because of its pre-existing lack of sustainability. Taking into account the required CC&E wage changes and focusing on the positions required to move forward the Vision 2040 and City Council 2023-2025 goals, we are recommending the reduction of staffing and services within departments funded either in full or in part by the general fund. Because remember, the general fund is the one most affected by 5 and 50 and that strangulation of our finances. That includes the library, finance, police department, and economic development. Of note, all other general fund departments, all those other departments we talked about, have reduced expenses as far as possible and allocated as much as possible to those revenue generating funds, where you see the dollar signs up there. Even with these actions to propose a balanced budget, cuts in personnel and services within the general fund departments were required. The library, which is funded completely with general fund dollars, will reduce personnel, including a library assistant 1 and a library assistant 2. The library will also reduce the hours of one of the library assistant 1 positions down to those hours that are funded by a grant. In other words, that's outside money funding those hours, not the general fund. In addition, the library will reduce service hours to Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. We worked really hard on this one, and it should be noted that the Monmouth Library is closed Mondays to open on Saturdays. So we're trying to provide service throughout the area, Independence and Monmouth coordinating together. With the reduction in service hours, the remaining library personnel will be able to absorb the duties of those positions being eliminated. Not easily, but they will be able to do so. The finance accountant position is currently empty, and it will not be filled for fiscal year 2024. This position was partially grant funded and partially funded through the general fund. The grant funds will be repurposed and used for other positions and necessary services for our community. The half-time community support officer position housed within the police department is currently empty and will not be filled for fiscal year 2024. Those savings will be spread across the general fund to continue to support necessary services for our community. The Economic Development Department, which is funded in part by general fund and in part by the Tourism and Events Fund, will reduce personnel, including the community liaison manager. Most of the duties of this position can be absorbed by the communications manager and the downtown manager, along with support from the office specialist. Now, remember when I talked about our vision, the Vision 2040 and the council goals, there was a huge emphasis put on communications and communications manager. So our communications manager can absorb some of the duties of the community liaison manager. The community liaison manager cannot absorb duties of the communications manager. And so the decision had to be made. The communications manager plays a pivotal role in the 2023-2025 council goals and is partially supported by grant funding. The downtown manager is fully funded by the Revenue Generating Tourism and Events Fund, not the general fund. The office specialist is a repurpose of the existing permitting technician position. The repurposed position now includes permitting duties, IT technician duties, website design and updating duties, and support to the downtown manager and communications manager. The need for assistance within the IT department was discussed in fiscal year 2023, but was not funded. We have been working our IT department director to death. We have one department director. We have 50.
Hawaii.
I know, right?
Don't give him any
I have the pictures to prove it.
Only because we have an IT technician for him, so he could. We have 50 employees. We have cybersecurity issues. Cities are getting attacked throughout the nation, and we have one person. One. The devastation that a cybersecurity attack could cause is, I can tell you. Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
So by combining multiple duties into one already existing full-time position, we were able to fund this much-needed IT position. This position is supported through multiple funds, including revenue-generating funds. As we know, the Public Works Department funds are for the most part revenue-generating funds and provide sufficient funding for all capital projects and personnel with the continued prioritization of infrastructure projects, including water, sewer, and transportation, as well as the continued increase in private development. The Public Works Department will be adding a project engineer position in fiscal year 2024 that is fully supported through revenue-generating funds. In other words, Gerald has money, we don't. He gets a person, I don't.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry. Whoops,
He
sorry.
does not look sorry. Does he look sorry, y'all? Because I don't think he looks sorry. Cost of living increase and the CC&E. Now, this has a large effect on the general fund. So the cost of living adjustment COLAs are set in our collective bargaining agreements. We do have 2 unions, we do negotiate with them, and those COLAs are set. So the COLA is also addressed by the new CC&E, and everything as far as COLA and CC&E are reflected in our proposed budget. The rollout of the CC&E recommendations is really complex. And I literally have, what was it? They were like this long, paper this long, desk length this wide, 5 or 6 of them, I think, to figure out how we were gonna roll that out. Extraordinarily complex. So what we're going to do is give you a summary as opposed to 5 long, huge sheets. The CC&E does affect different departments and personnel differently, as the purpose of the CC&E is to make certain that there is pay equity amongst all people employed by the city. Because of the complexity of the rollout, we're going to provide a summary of the actions taken. The CC&E recommended an across-the-board increase in fiscal year 2023 for every employee. In addition, the CC&E recommended wage increases for particular positions to be completed within fiscal year 2024. These recommended actions will take many forms. Those employees covered by a CBA will receive a COLA of 4%. Those employees not covered by a CBA will not receive a COLA, but will move up a step on their position pay scale as of July 1, 2023 instead. Am I right, Amanda? Yeah. Perfect. And remember, I'm going to complain because this was an unfunded mandate by the state. We did not have a choice. Revised personnel allocations. We talked about this a little bit, but in fiscal year 2023, that was Bob's year. He implemented a significant change, and it was the right change to make, which was made to how the city allocates the cost of certain general fund administrative and finance personnel. We have continued with and further refined this change in fiscal year 2024's proposed budget. As noted in the introduction, the city has implemented the use of an additional software module, which will allow management to track actual allocation hours more accurately in the coming years. In this and future fiscal years, you will see adjustments in the personnel charges across most funds as more concise data becomes available through the use of the software module. Debt and city obligations. The Independence Landing development is complete and fully occupied, and we continue to see the financial benefits of this project to the city. The transient lodging tax revenue collected mainly through the Independence Hotel fully supports the Tourism and Events Fund and downtown and city-sponsored programming, which previously relied on general fund revenue. In addition, property tax revenue from the Independence Landing development will allow the Urban Renewal District to completely cover its debt. Fiscal year 2023 marked the beginning of the Urban Renewal District paying back its loans from the general fund, and those loan repayments continue in fiscal year 2024. Fiscal year 2024, MINEC is again expected to fully fund payment of the MINEC bond debt and to make interest payments on the notes held by the city. Correct, Bob?
Sure.
I'm correct, okay. In fiscal year 2023, the Public Works funds paid off all water, sewer, and stormwater interfund loans, again reducing debt. In fiscal year 2024, the Public Works Fund will pay off all transportation interfund loans. Yes? Yes. Again, we've been asked to really watch our funds to pay off debt. That's what this proposed budget does. That's what we're working towards. Future budgetary challenges. Labor costs. Labor costs will continue to increase due to required payments to the Public Employee Retirement Services System, Health insurance costs are continuing to increase. What we've heard is 5 to 15% increase in health. General liability of 9% increase. Auto of 5%. Property of 7%. Did you hear anything under 3%? No. So as those increase, we continue to see that strangulation of the general fund. While utilities are largely self-sustaining, stormwater and transportation remain areas of fiscal concern for future fiscal years. Transportation, if you think about it, is funded mainly by the gas tax. There are more people working remotely. There are more electric cars. There's less gas tax. That means our transportation fund is going to take a hit. There's some things working in the legislature that I think are going to help us, but I can't say that they are, and I can't say that they aren't because it hasn't made its way through yet. But we're hoping that they will help us, because that one is going to have challenges as we move more and more towards an electric and remote workforce. Master plans underway now or planned in the next fiscal year will guide the city in creating long-term financial plans to ensure that these funds have sufficient operating and capital revenue. While the completion of Independence Landing has offset several costs typically borne by the general fund, it has become clear that the general fund is not sustainable. We need to explore additional revenue sources for the general fund to continue to support general services such as police, library, museum, and parks. My staff have performed professionally, creatively, and collaboratively in preparing this budget. This was not easy. This is a contraction budget with cuts in every department. Well, mainly every department. But our job isn't finished. There really remains some hard work to be done. The staff and the council will be doing that hard work in fiscal year 2024. We have to explore additional revenue sources for the general fund, because without additional revenue sources, there will be additional personnel and services cuts in fiscal year 2025. We want to thank the city council and the budget committee for their time and dedication to reviewing this budget and listening to me and ensuring the priorities set forth in the fiscal year 23-24 best reflect the objectives and priorities of the Independence Community. So,
Do you
yes, ma'am.
have some suggestions for additional revenue sources?
So there are a lot of options, and the council is going to have to take a look at what they want to do and what our community wants to do. The usual sources of additional revenue include levies,
Right.
bonds, and fees. Am I missing one, Rob? Those are
I've
the
been through all of those, and I know how difficult that can be.
very,
Except this is a great little community, you know. And we come through, don't we? Yeah,
you do, and in
we
fact,
do.
Sean just gave numbers on the community, thank you, community facility. And one of the questions asked was, if we did this, how would you want to pay for it? And the community said, yeah, sure, we might. We might want to do that. This is a good community. Any other questions before Ms. Van?
Under future budgetary challenges and labor costs, Page of Oregon has now gone into effect, and now you have obligations for that. Are we, and have we been successfully completing our first couple of quarters, and kind of what, and how is that projected going forward, or are you looking at potentially going into an equivalent plan?
Amanda?
We are looking, and we will be doing an alternative plan that will be saving us a significant amount of money, up to $12,000 for this year at least. And then it'll save us in the future as well, but we have already started that road, down that road.
Mayor?
I know that you recently attended the LOC conference and were visiting with your colleagues. Would you like to mention what's happening in other cities around the state?
This is happening in other cities around the state. Almost every city, this is happening in almost every single city. Thank you, Mayor, because that was on tab number 4, and I was so talky, I forgot tab number 4. It is, we talk about this all of the time at our city manager meetings, because when 5 and 50 hit, it depended on where you were, and it was very random. Some cities, their tax rate was less than $1, and it was frozen there. Some cities, their tax rate was $8, and up to half $8. We are not at $8, we're at about 4.5. But overall, almost every city is struggling, and this has been 30 years, and we are right at that tipping point, and every city is at the tipping point. Independence is no different. We might be a little bit luckier because we have this great community. Other cities, they hit this tipping point a few years ago, and it's a challenge. And they're all looking, this is why, if you look, for those of you who spent time on our SDC rates and our rate plans, you saw other cities had fees. We don't have any real fees. Those other cities put those fees in place because they hit the tipping point before we did, and they chose fees in order to backfill the general fund. So thank you, Mayor. Yes, ma'am.
Actually, this is probably for Bob. This is probably a premature question. But with every city in the state now being allowed to use speed cameras, and I don't want the police department to become, financially responsible for everything. Because I've already heard backlash, it's gonna be, they're stealing my identity, and I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. Maybe if you're so worried, you shouldn't be speeding down the road. Is that something that we might, in the future, look to implement in our town? And if so, how would you see, because you've been here for a long, long time, whether that would increase or decrease?
Increase or decrease revenue or speed?
Actually, yeah, citations, actually,
Oh, it would
citations.
increase citations dramatically. We do not have the time capacity to do a lot of traffic right now. So our traffic statistics are very low. And we were getting by with our motorcycle officer, Lance, and he retired. So now we don't have anybody on the bike that is just dedicated to go out and work traffic. So yeah, it would definitely increase. I am not sure, I have been in this community a long time, I am not sure how welcoming they would be to that. So it would certainly require more conversation, but yeah.
Well, I'm for it.
Who decides that?
It would probably be a council decision, I would think, so, yeah.
I know this concept has been discussed before. I don't know that it's necessarily been discussed in this forum before, but we have two police departments within 4 miles of one another. Have we looked at possibility, some efficiencies across the board there?
Certainly. We certainly have, yeah. I'm not sure that's in the cards for the future, I mean, it's not in your future, but, yeah.
But with the reception of the all hands meetings, you're getting a lot more collaboration and cooperation between and cross-pollination of all the different services and sources that are available and we've had for a long time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So in function, you're already collaborating.
So Joe?
Do you have the number for the previous budget, total annual budget? Like most of the time you put like the previous year, but unless I'm just not seeing
The general
it. The budget summary. I was just wondering.
I don't have that readily available.
Yeah.
That would have been a great thing to have dropped in there as a comparative. I apologize for that.
We'll do that next year.
You know what the ballpark was, though, right? I mean, usually,
It's pretty close.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, here you go.
I mean, I could pull it up on my computer.
Oh, yeah. So
Someone can look it up while we're moving forward.
I get it. All right.
Oh.
So.
Are there any other questions on the budget presentation?
Yeah, I have one. What criteria did you use to determine how to do the contractions, as you call them, with the different departments?
So, we looked first at those that are funded by the general funds, because that's the one most effective. And then we looked at those positions that weren't filled, we just chose not to fill them. Then we looked at those positions that, other positions could take over and backfill the duties. So, a good example is in the economic development. We have a downtown manager that is funded by revenue funds, and she can take over a part of that. And then we have our communications manager, who is funded partially by a grant and partially by the general fund, who can take over the other part. So knowing we have those two people who would backfill, we could release that position. So that was our main way of figuring out how we could release people. We, sorry.
Okay.
Do we have other questions? If not, I'm gonna let Bob go on to the next step, Chair, if that's appropriate.
Are there any other questions on the budget summary? Hearing none, go ahead.
Okay, so, that's last year's.
I will remember.
Page 11, I believe, is where we start with the budget summary. And that first chart just shows all of the different funds and how they are coming together for a total budget. I mean, I don't think I'm gonna read them line by line.
If you need the data.
That's all right. Rob, anything you want to hit there as a highlight? Oh, okay. I think you created that little chart, so that's
I did.
I was offering it.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, then there's a lot of other really good information for you to absorb as you go through.
And a lot of it was discussed in the budget message in summary fashion. So you've heard a lot of it already. The appropriations, where we use them, the types of funds. I'll just join.
Definitely. No, please. Let's see. Page 14, let's go to the top there where it says general fund. Looking more in depth at the city's largest single fund budget, the next two graphs illustrate a breakdown by category of spending where it can be seen that this fiscal year personnel services makes up more than 60% of the cost of the fund, which is typical for the city. At nearly $3.5 million, and with the largest number of full and part-time employees in the fiscal year 23-24, the police department makes up about 45% of the general fund operating budget. About 8% of the budget, or $627,000, is used by the city's administration. Finance, community resources function, which provides administrative services and support to all city departments. Yeah, again, I'm not gonna just read all of this. Jump down to property taxes, the largest source of non-dedicated funds that are projected to increase by about the 3% allowed margin. We'll go to the next page, talk about public works. You can see by area, water, sewer, stormwater, and street in the illustration. Roughly how many $1 million each of those has in this budget, and which is the larger and smaller of the enterprise funds. So we call those so, right? Yeah, okay.
Can I ask about I'm going back to the previous page, intergovernmental resources, revenues, I'm sorry. Why does the LOC forecast that marijuana revenue is gonna be flat because of Measure 110?
Because they took all our money away.
Okay.
Yeah, those projections primarily come from the League of Oregon Cities, and they provide projections based and rates per capita, because a lot of that stuff is distributed on a per capita basis. Without significant growth in your community, you have to rely on the rates. And for example, during the pandemic, liquor taxes went way up, go figure. But cigarette taxes continue to drop, and Kenna talked about gas tax monies. Shared revenues are on kind of a decline, at least from a projected basis.
Yeah, it's not just the electric vehicles, it's remote work.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Measure 110 took some of that marijuana tax money and repurposed it, right? It got sent to the treatment centers, and they had to create that whole like organization and process.
Or talk about creating it. Your office.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. This is all really good information, but we'll probably soon end up in departmental reports, which was kind of our plan. So if you have a question as you flip through these pages, speak up, but we're just kind of going, chart by chart at this point, I would say. To get us to where we start looking at some actual numbers.
Does the trolley system fall under the transportation?
It does not in our budget. It is, it lives in the city of Monmouth's budget.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The trolley.
Oh, okay.
We had trolley money as a grant or a program, somehow, a program allowance from the state. And we do still have some trolley money but we used ours for like the beginning stages of determining whether or not it was feasible, like feasibility study type stuff. But then when the grant, the program actually launched, Monmouth took over and is handling all of the trolley financing now.
We will continue to assist though, and that will be mainly Sean's department, helping with grants to keep that running once the funding runs out. So that's.
Do we have any reports on the trolley? Be good or bad?
It's huge.
It's busy. I've heard a lot of great things. Sean's actually ridden it a number of times.
Well, congratulations.
So the trolley stops in Independence, well, if there's funding that needs to be for like signs or coverage or anything like that, that'll be paid for from Monmouth?
It was paid for from the grant. The original grant was funded all of that at this point.
So that's what's being managed in Monmouth, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
They
They're not
ended up with all of the
collecting
grant
trolley
funding and they're managing that grant.
So they're acting as the fiscal agent.
For the grant.
Good for them.
And then the money is good for 2 years for operating costs, and then you guys are gonna have a meeting, like Independence Monmouth will meet and figure out how they're gonna pay for it at that point.
We're already
talking
before that point.
We're already talking about how to fund it, and if there's any grants that are available. you know, what can be done to continue the trolley. It seems to be, I've heard some very, very positive things. I've heard some, you know, that it's empty sometimes. I've heard that it's full a lot. Most people seem to really love it. I was talking to someone, I don't remember who, it was someone in the community, and they were talking about, watching folks, they would go shopping, and maybe, Counselor, maybe it was you.
Go shopping,
It was-
two grandfathers taking their grandsons to lunch at McDonald's, and a woman getting on with a double stroller in Monmouth to take the babies and herself to the park in Independence to take a walk.
Great.
It makes a lot of stops when you're behind it. It's not bad to
Just try to regulate the speed.
Yes, there's our speed regulation, it's a
I tried it in the very beginning and it never came to
As long as you do it safely,
So,
we're all good.
that was in the very beginning when they were getting the kinks out.
Yeah, there were, I do know there were glitches in the beginning, and I think they've worked out most of the glitches.
Yeah, just anecdotally, I would say that being here on the weekends, it kind of changes the vibe of our town. There's a lot of people at the trolley stops, there's a lot more activity.
That's like a reward at our house, like if you do chores, you get to ride the trolley on Sunday.
Okay, page 17, general fund summary. So this kind of breaks down for you the sources of general fund, where we can manage to get different sources of income to fund it. The total sources of the general fund, proposed for this budget, $5,588,523. And then the uses right below it on page 17. You can look through and see where every department falls in the uses. Just to kind of reiterate something that Kenna said earlier, we went through and anywhere that we could say work was being done for any of those funds that are not general fund. For example, if Jason does a bunch of IT work for Gerald's workers, we took all of that money out and it is not showing in the IT budget here. It's showing in the personnel budget in those specific areas where that work's happening. So that happened across the board with all of the funds. Even the police department, we took a little bit of our personnel and put it to the tourism and events fund for the work that we do on those events. And we spent a lot of time trying to find a way to get everything we could for general fund revenue to not have to make cuts. But we still had to do that.
And Bob?
Yes.
Last year, we talked about public works. Each one of the funds is like a business. Well, instead of me hiring my own accountants and my own IT people, we actually contract that out with the other businesses, which are finance and IT. So now that we've been able to figure out what allocation or how much they're actually working for public works and doing business for public works, we reallocated some of the personnel costs out of the general fund and over into public works. So we're paying them directly, if that makes sense.
It's so much more logical than relying on things like interfund loans, which are extremely complicated.
So Jason has been double dipping then?
Well, no, Jason's been working.
How do you not get afford the Hawaii trip?
They make me wear a hard hat.
So what that also will do, when you look at some of these departmental budgets, they will seem really low. And you'll wonder, why is it so much lower than it was the previous year? It's because some of those costs are in another department now. So for this first year, it's gonna seem like some of them really reduced more than they actually did. We just got the revenue from a different department.
Just to make sure I understand this, in the sources under the library, $63,000, that's how much the library generated?
Those are specific revenues generated by the library, that's correct.
Okay, and
Our
then,
CCRLS.
okay, but
monies.
then you needed $534,000 to operate, correct? Okay.
And the difference is the general fund subsidy, if you will, from general revenues within the general fund.
We're trying to make it as easy as possible, so I hope it is.
Well,
A question, so is there a breakout or some kind of overall summary of the cuts that were made and how they were distributed, if you will? Because I can see a difference between last year's budget, this year's budget. There's a lot of, up and down the spreadsheet, but I'd like to see the chunk of money that we didn't have this year that we did have last year, and how did we distribute those contractions? Who took the cuts?
So in the budget summary, on page 8, there's a little chart. It doesn't show the amount, but it shows the positions eliminated or left vacant. And so you'll see that the main eliminated positions are in the library, which is 100% general fund.
I guess I'm looking for a dollar amount. Do we have a dollar amount for the amount that, the difference between this year and last year? And what did we do with it?
Oh, well, we were $1.2 million short.
Okay, so that 1.2 that we don't have this year that we did last year, do we have a breakdown of how we distribute those cuts?
So, okay, we start, I'm gonna go all the way back. We started with a $1.2 million shortfall. Part of what's going on is in 2023, when Bob implemented this shift in how we do allocations, what was happening is we would build our budget based on the resources for general fund, and we would have a $2 million shortfall, and we would take it to Public Works. And,
No,
well,
it wasn't really that.
yeah,
It was just taking.
we would just take it from Public Works.
Just transfer is the word.
Yes. Yes. Gerald likes to say we took it, but, whatever.
Makes sense.
I think he did, but whatever. So we would take the Public Works money to backfill general fund. The best practices, as we move forward in time, all best practices change, right? So the best practices are to do the allocations that we're doing. So we're not just, so that money, we lost that money, because we're not just taking what we want for the general fund, we're taking what is actually allocated over.
So, so if I understand this correct, so $1.2 million, how much was it?
Well, it was 2 million last year, or the year before, no,
The
wait.
year before.
The year before, it was
Last year, we're down to
2 million.
700,000 range.
I mean, just in the general fund, what do we not have this year that we had last year?
$700,000
Okay, so of that,
of that,
of the general fund, we
Right.
don't have 700,000.
That was the overhead allocation that we did take.
approximately 700,000.
So it was, so just as an aside, that 700,000 that we don't have this year was entirely because of the inter-fund loans?
It was entirely because of the way that we pulled money over from Public Works. We pulled it over in a lump sum rather than in a calculation, allocated calculation. So we went to best practice, we had a change in best practices so that we calculated it based upon the number of hours. Go to page 92. Let me see if I can have that one. Yep. So if you look at page 92, sorry, you need reading glasses.
Yeah.
Did you do
My
this-
bad.
Did you do this landscape next year?
No. But I will change the way it's laid out.
So if you look at, I'm a very good example, city manager, that top one, you'll see that I'm allocated 35% to admin, 15% to transportation, 15 to sewer, 20 to water, 15 to storm, for a total of 100. So that's an allocation calculation. In years prior, that allocation calculation was not completed. It was simply, the general fund needs $2 million, right? Best practice now, and there was nothing wrong with that. It's just best practices now is to figure out how much time I work for each of these funds and actually allocate my salary to that.
Okay.
And when we did that, what we realized is that we had been pulling more than our allocations from Public Works into the general fund. So Bob started fixing that last year.
So it was, it sounds like it was more of an administrative, like almost financial issue for how the deficit appeared on our books this year. I guess I'm trying to understand, how does the tax video we watched, right, factor into the deficit we're now experiencing, if you're telling me it's just
No, so what we were doing is we were avoiding that by pulling money from public works. So the general fund was contracted, it was contracted years ago.
Okay.
But we were taking backfilling from public works, the revenue funds. So that contraction didn't show up
Right.
until the best practices changed.
So the best practices shifted and it revealed the problem.
Bingo.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that problem, do we have a breakout of it? A more detailed assessment of how we spread the pain of the problem around?
Not really.
Not from original, it was, here's all of our costs, this is how much money we need, and so we're pulling this amount of money from street, sewer, water, and stormwater to fill that gap. But there's no breakout justification like what you see here, which is why we did the breakout justification to show each person where they're allocated. And so if money is paying Jason, I have a percent allocation that justifies he's working this much percent of his time for street, sewer, water, storm. So anybody in general funds that does work for public works or finance, it's allocated to public works. We have the front counter utility person predominantly works for public works because they take care of all of my sewer, water, and stormwater bills and handles all of those transactions. So a lion's share of that position is covered by public works. Before, there never was this. It was just, right, this is my gap, I'm gonna pull, so you can't really compare.
In effect, we're establishing a new baseline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you go to page 18, which is I think where we were, almost to the bottom, come up like 5 lines, and you'll find a line that says overhead allocations. And if you look at the overhead allocation for 2021, you'll see it was almost 2.5 million. And then in 2021, 2022, it was 2.6544 million. And then last year, we really made an effort to get it to 0. I mean, our goal when we started last year was we're not going to do an overhead allocation, and it just wasn't going to happen. That we cut and cut and cut and ended up at $700,000, and decided that we'd wait until we had a new city manager to press on and do all this well. That's where we were last year.
You mentioned that you're talking best practices. Was moving the money from one fund to another, was that illegal? Was
No,
it
no.
unethical, or was it just a bad practice?
It was just, in fact, it was what a lot of cities did for a long time.
Yeah.
And then, well, Rob, you can talk about it more than I can, but.
Yeah, there's nothing illegal about it in state statute or anything. It is no longer considered a best practice, to use Kenneth's term. What people look for now is justification for moving monies from public works to the general fund. There should be a justification, either reimbursement for services provided or a franchise fee that is charged to every other utility in the community. Those are the things that you're seeing now. But no, there was nothing illegal, to answer your question.
How are you doing the traceability though? If there's like 15% of Jason's job, sorry Jason, put you on the spot here, but if it's allocated to public works, who's actually doing the?
It's actually being done through payroll.
Okay.
We have a software
Is that the
module
Excel
that's.
thing?
That's the new
Okay.
module.
Okay.
And this year, honestly, we did best guess. Like every employee said, this is where I think I'll fall. And then we're gonna do a look back and see how that actually happened.
So yeah, I can add to that. So basically, for my time, whenever I go to a department to do some work, I actually track my time down to, I think, 5-minute intervals, and then that gets allocated directly to them.
Billable hours.
Yes.
Bingo.
Good attorney.
Did we get COVID or ARPA funds that went into the general at all?
How did you allocate those, Bob?
So some of the funds went into the general fund,
So
but
that
like
would,
to
that
pay
would make
some.
it bigger last
Yeah,
year.
but it was to pay salary, like we paid for part of a couple of our employees and for Marshall, all out of ARPA money.
And that is a part of what hid some of the problems that are popping up. Is that ARPA money?
We had more money last year because it was
Because of ARPA.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, as a clarification,
to me, it seems like no one, we could potentially have gotten caught, and this is why I do support getting this figured out now, that if we're taking money from public works, eventually that money is needed for sewer, water, and stormwater. So by just continually taking that money over time, doesn't let us expose really the needs that we have in the community.
It makes the transfers, by doing what we're doing now, it makes the transfers very transparent to, and getting to the readability for the community. Oh, I can look at this person or this position and know exactly where they're being allocated out, which funds are paying for that position as part of that transparency.
Did we get to you yet?
I'm 50% satisfied. I would like to see a more robust breakdown of, like you mentioned, the positions that were cut back, by department, but I don't see a breakdown by dollars of how we distributed those cuts, right?
I think
Because
that's what he's looking
Proportional.
for.
proportionate to the deficit that we had.
We really didn't create that because we just kept cutting until we got to the number that we needed. And so it wasn't like we said, oh, we're
Take 10%.
We're gonna take 10% from the
Right.
library or 10%, we didn't do that.
It was a more surgical approach than that, but I appreciate.
Sure, but at the end of the day, the effect is still going to be a
Correct,
proportionate.
and I appreciate what you're saying in terms of the dollars aren't attached to her table in her budget message.
I mean, if we're trying to be more transparent right now, better practices, I think that kind of transparency would benefit the committee, so we know where the city's, saying, okay, well, we have this deficit, where we, how are we gonna take it out of what department? Not only by positions, but by dollars as well. Otherwise, there's a huge black hole there. I don't know percentage-wise, like I can do back of the napkin calculations with my pencil on the book here in the middle of the meeting, but it wasn't, I feel kind of blind for that.
Yeah, because I think ultimately we have to explain to the community why the library's not open on Saturday. And I mean, there's a lot of good information in here and I understand it. And I think it's a really good job that you've done with this, but ultimately we have to have those conversations with the community.
And how does the salary play into those?
Well, I mean, the fact that positions have been cut. How do we
How much
explain that
did
to
we
the
save
community?
by cutting this position?
It eventually comes down to services provided.
Yeah.
I mean, I know from the city's perspective, we're talking about salaried position, this position, that person, that person. You guys work with people on a day-to-day basis. But those positions transfer to community services that the community then relies upon or sees an increase or a decrease of.
Hold on.
So eventually.
Hold on.
Just-
Oh, yeah.
She's got the table size sheet.
told you that one.
Okay. I can do this quickly, maybe.
Careful what you ask for.
More information is better.
Yeah,
Okay,
no, I appreciate
so I probably need a calculator, someone to run a calculator. Anybody?
I'll do your spreadsheet.
Thank you.
Just as an aside, this is one of the reasons why we used to have 2 meetings, right? Because this kind of stuff would come up in the first one, and we don't want to have to spend an hour trying to calculate spreadsheets right now. We could
Won't take
have
an
a
hour.
second,
This will go really,
second meeting,
this will go really fast.
only if we requested it.
As soon as Bob pulls up a thing.
Okay, I'm ready.
That's what they're trying for.
I
Okay,
have a 10 key, not 3 bags.
that would be nice, right? Oh, there was my name tag.
I think we all know your name.
Okay,
You
good.
could have-
So 25,122, 72,710,
72,
72,
710.
and 29,082. Okay, total that.
126,914.
126,914 is library.
And then what does that number represent, the cut to it?
Those are the cuts.
Personnel?
Personnel. Can you double check me?
I'm not sure you got rid of the position that was 72,710. It's 72,710 position.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Bob, are you gonna
Those three.
have an overview while she's going through that to the end? Because this might be a good time for everybody to take a bathroom break if they so need one. Thank you, I'm gonna.
I hear that the chair is called for a break.
All right, and then.
So you guys do that.
um,
Okay.
Standards
So are you okay?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Personally?
I've
had to run along, I've had to go through this process before, I'm numb to the world.
Go ahead. All right, thank you, Sharon. Okay, we ran numbers. And just the personnel. Now, every department head did their own cuts. The personnel, we handled at the executive level. The library personnel was 126,000, almost 127,000. Finance was 92,000. Economic development was 100,800, is that right? And the police department was 50,000, almost 51,000, for a total of $370,108.
Economic development was 100,800.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the police portion,
50,000, almost 51, somewhere around 51.
Okay.
Does that include the positions that were needed but not filled?
Yes, yes. And one of the things I forgot to talk about, I talked about it with council last night. Karen and I are going to be creating a training for all of our committees, commissions, and boards. And a part of that is going to be an explanation and a conversation about operations versus policy. And I don't know if any of you have had that training. So just very quickly, this is a really good time for an example. Operations is, we're going to cut these positions. Policy is, we're going to maybe try and take money from somewhere else. You don't get to talk about who the person is, and you don't get to talk about whether I cut them or not. You just get to talk about where the money comes from. So I just want to make that very, very, very clear. All right.
And that wasn't the total of what we cut. I mean, every department head, we visited, and you'll hear in their very brief reports today, you'll hear that everyone cut things that were general fund funded. We aren't doing things that we had hoped to do, things that we wanted to do, improvements that we wanted to make. Even replacing our desktop computers this year, which we were on a schedule to do. Every 5 years, we rotate a different set of computers. We're not rotating any computers out this year, so hopefully nothing breaks and we make it through the year. But that was just an example.
Forgive me, can I get the grand total once more, please?
370,874.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
what does that total represent? You said 700 a few minutes ago.
Yeah, we
This
start.
is personnel.
This is personnel.
This is personnel.
Personnel, and there's also
Of the
services that are
positions.
partners, right?
Yeah.
Some partners cut services too.
Plus, after the last year where we ran numbers on allocations, we had more time in this budget cycle to drill down a little deeper into each one of the personnel and allocate a little bit more appropriately based on, because last go around, we said, okay, we got to start thinking about how much is being allocated over, and up until that point, it was never really discussed. So the staff really started taking a hard look at, okay, where's my time really going? So this budget reflects that refinement, the second go around, second iteration.
And it'll be refined every year as we get better and better.
Okay.
Okay, page 19 is the administrative, the budget of the administration department. And Kenna, I think that was just you that highlights.
That is just me. I think you heard most of the administration in my budget, in the budget message. So really the good stuff is we continue to work with our neighboring jurisdictions. We continue to improve communications and support among our city departments. We're working really hard on the debt portfolio, and we're working really hard on fiscal sustainability and how we're going to do that. Those have been our main focuses. This budget is a part of what we've been doing the last year. We are without a, let me see. We did make a couple of changes. Finance and human resources are separated out as distinct departments. And that is, again, transparency. We want our people to see what we're doing, we're spending money on. And then, of course, you heard about our relocation of personnel services and materials. That is what administration has been doing in a very, very quick nutshell.
Great, finance department.
Well, I've been here a couple of weeks, about maybe a month now. But going back through, much of this budget was actually built before I got here. But have worked with the finance team to try and determine, what went into the generation of this budget and working with the folks in admin as well. A lot of what we do is kind of the back office, accounting, financial reporting, obviously some of the budgeting. One of the things that we're really stressing as a team this year is starting from yes with our departments. All too often, a finance department can become the gatekeepers or the ones who always say no, there's no money. And we don't want to be that department. We want to be, yeah, how can we help you get what you need done within the parameters that we have, whether that's scarce resources or legalities. So that's something that we're really, really focused on this year, looking for those collaborations with other departments, working with Gerald and his team, working with the folks at the library, with whoever, to make sure that their needs for information are met. Also looking to streamline some of our internal processes. One of the things that I work a lot on with our other clients and now with the city is looking at how we do things and trying to refine those processes. We've already made some minor adjustments in some utility billing practices. We're looking at how we just administer those things and how we work together. We're looking at some new processes to help streamline accounts payable processing, for example. So a lot of those kinds of things. You'll see some reduction in the personnel services for the finance department, again, as a result of some of the allocations, but also because there was only a partial year and the planning that we're doing for next year in terms, because the year starts in July, right? So our firm is contracted through December. So that's 6 months of next year that actually gets moved to contractual services instead of personnel services. It's just some kind of wonkiness, but the overall total expenditures for the department are relatively stable, other than giving up that one position that's not funded.
Great, thank you. I'll point something out here because we can follow it along in all of the budgets. And that is, if you look at the number 63900, that's the line number under uses on page 22. You'll see it's $12,700. And this year, Jason, our IT manager, went and calculated the software expense for the entire city and then broke it up as to where it belonged. And he told us what those numbers were going to be for the software that we need in every department. So in every department now, you're gonna see a line like that. And it all used to be in Jason's department. So
It's kind of like a chargeback process.
Kind of?
yeah, only it's what they actually, like their share of, yeah, exactly. Okay. Good, Amanda?
The HR department was just broken out of the administrative department to provide more clarity to our community and to our council. So you'll see in our report.
All right, well, I feel like I've kind of already been covered almost.
Are there any questions?
So yeah, you will see a big change, specifically in the capital outlay. So that's where all the software subscriptions live. That's now zeroed out for IT, and then all the software costs, as they described, are directly allocated to each department depending on a variety of factors, whether it's how much they use a certain system, and how many users they have, how many devices they have. It depends on the specific piece of software, but that was all calculated out in that pie chart there. You can kind of see the overall use of IT assets from the various departments. It also really kind of gives us a look at maybe some other areas that we don't consider. You know, like people think that volunteers are free. Well, they're not when it comes to IT. They still need a computer, they still need antivirus, they still need email, all that stuff. So we really get a good look at what it costs to have an operational employee working for us. And that Bob also mentioned, as far as some of the cuts that the IT department made, we are not going to be replacing any desktop computers this year. We have set aside a small emergency fund just in case something does blow up. We're going to be a little more reactive rather than proactive this year in an effort to save some money. Other than that, we had cut training for quite a few years to meet budget requirements. That was getting a little long in the tooth, so we did put some money back into training, but not as much as I would have liked, but it'll get us up to speed, especially with the additional new position. But yeah, those are pretty much the highlights for IT. Does anybody have any questions?
Is that training for you, Jason, or is that staff training on software and stuff like that?
That would be training for myself and then actually.
Because you need to stay on the leading edge
Yep.
every day.
He's got to keep adding letters after his name.
Right.
Great, Sean?
Yeah, so mine is pretty simple. Really the only, I think, kind of significant thing to call out is my professional services line there. And that's really just for funding to do some work with the property west of the airport, trying to move that more towards getting shovel-ready status for industrial development. And then also, you know, we're kind of beginning the transition. We've been doing a lot of business support programming with ARPA money, and of course, that's gonna start tapering off. And so I've got a little bit of that professional services money to implement some business support program, or actually continue some of the stuff that we've already been doing, like the marketing Mondays, you know, the kind of regular budget money. I think that's it on my end.
Questions for Sean? Okay, great. Police department. You'll see our personnel line actually went down. That's because of, it went down slightly, but that's because of a little reduction in personnel and an increase in some costs to have personnel. Overall, the budget is just hold the line or reduce pretty much all the way down. Some of the things that really increased from last year were insurance. We under budgeted last year in insurance, all kind of insurance, and so we got that closer this year, hopefully. And then the software moving into our department, instead of being in Jason's department, really increased our software costs. I'm sorry, I'm pausing a little bit. Rob's firm also redid all the count of the charts, so we have new numbers now, and it's a lot cleaner, but we haven't actually seen that until today, so.
Yeah, July 1, we have new account structure.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Any questions?
You guys, on the last budget, you would say like how many full-time employees and stuff like that, and I don't see that. Is that on a different page?
Is that 212 on the top? What is that?
It's in the narrative.
That's the department.
Yeah, I don't have a chart.
It's under police officers on page 31, 11 full-time officers and 1 part-time police officer, and then,
Okay.
Yeah,
So
same number as previously.
Okay.
I might be missing it, but I don't see line item 63900 in your department, Bob.
It would be the number that has the $63,550. No, not that one. Hang on.
It's not there.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that. The money's in there because the number, when I got the new chart of accounts today, I just looked to make sure the bottom line was right, and it was.
It's probably rolled into 63270.
Yeah,
That's what I was just
it says
thinking.
software
Okay,
there too.
there we go. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Chief, why does the Central School District pay for the resource officers?
They do, at the very top, we have budgeted $112,000 from the school district. So they only get 1.5, and they only get them during the school year. So they're not really paying for their entire, probably time. But the deal was, when we started it, we were splitting the cost of the resource officer, police department paid half, they paid half for the time that they were in the school even. So we may need to relook at that at some point, but I'm afraid if we ask for much more, we wouldn't get to keep our SROs.
When did they pass the bond?
There you go.
Back to the court.
When were you 10?
Court, pretty much, actually a department that is budgeted to make money next year, which is really odd because we haven't been writing a lot of tickets, so I don't know where they're getting their revenue. Part of the reason that the court does so well is because we have done the staffing there. We used to have a staff person in court that was a lot of hours and pretty expensive. And now one of the finance department employees just does it as like a quarter of her time. And we pay very little for that. So that's helped that department a lot. Community development. There's yeah, we've got that. That's Fred, okay. So, yeah, also very much a hold the line. We went through this a couple of times. The one big cost here is a contract service, and I think that was to help with a project. And I'm not remembering off the top of my head what that project was, the $50,000 there. Sean, do you remember what that was? Fred would be able to tell me like that.
Yeah.
Developer services, 63,140.
I'm not sure what that would be.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it wasn't, there was some big projects coming in, I think we were gonna have to farm out some.
That's
work.
it, it's called.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yes, it is, so many cities don't have their own planner, usually cities, smaller cities. So there is the Council of Governments, and they have planners on staff, and a lot of cities contract with them. So we've allocated this 50,000 just because right now, Fred, like Jason, has been working insane amounts of time. We have a lot of development going on, we have a lot of projects for him, and he's going to need some help. And so we had to allocate that to come in with a planner and help us.
And it also matches the development fee, I mean.
Yeah, it's 50,000 in, 50,000 out, so the developers are gonna pay for that time to get their plans reviewed, that's all.
Just a suggestion, the line item numbers are not in numerical order, and they're not consistent from one department to another. If we could just make those consistent, it would be a lot easier.
Well, that'd be great.
Go back and forth.
We can certainly do that. It will mess up those category totals.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
yeah,
you can do two charts. You can do one based on.
We're supposed to make it easier to reach. Or maybe within the categories, at least they'd be enumerated.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It would be a little easier to follow the
Fair enough. Thank
conversation,
you.
yeah.
And thank you, that input, as we're making this better, that input is really helpful.
I'm just thinking, nobody has said, look at page 2, flip to chart 47, flip that over.
Well, that was the biggest plus I thought with this, was actually putting the narratives and the numbers together in
Yeah.
each department.
I like that as well.
Yeah, what's that?
Building department.
Building department, again, very much hold the line. You'll see the revenues or the sources of this department are budgeted at 193.6, and the total uses are 205, yeah.
And I will say, Karen, and I've asked Karen and Jeff to take a very hard look at what our permit costs are. They are a little bit low, and we're gonna go through the process to get them increased. So hopefully, with that increase, we can make it so that this is at least even, right? And we're not pulling from the general fund next year. But there's a process to that, and Karen could probably tell you what that process is, but it's a process to get our, yeah.
Yeah, because some of the fees we have adopted by city code, and now basically all the fees are at a state level, and so we just need to get them out of our code, or keep them up, or whatever, and determine if the state code fees are sufficient to our needs.
Does any of this have bearing on us passing the 10,000 mark?
Not really, this particular one doesn't.
Janitorial.
Amanda, you wanna take that?
Yeah, so janitorial department, we're staying the same. A lot of the facility stuff has moved out.
because of that new department that's been created by Gerald. But everything else in ours is, we didn't add a whole lot.
Didn't we used to contract this? Are we saving any money by bringing it in-house?
I believe we definitely are getting a better product. We're struggling. The reason we went to employing our own person to do this is because they were increasing the cost so much one year that we just couldn't justify it for what we were getting in the service. Library.
We've talked about me a lot. So as far as our expenditures go for supplies, materials, all that, we're staying fairly consistent. All of our cuts are coming in the form of personnel, and that will have an effect on the library next year. It's going to pause our work moving forward on the 2040 vision. So obviously we're not going to work towards expanding the library, not going to work toward expanding services or programs, because we're going to try and just tread water and stay where we're at while we can. Cutting the people will have an impact on the services that we can provide. We're hoping to remain steady as far as what we can offer, but we'll reevaluate as we go. And I'm obviously nervous about staff morale with losing half of the people in the department, regardless of their FTEs. Our main staffing losses, just so there wouldn't, just to be upfront, once that grant money is gone, we'll be losing our bilingual storytime provider, so we'll no longer have that. We're working to cross-train someone who's running our walking grant, because we're losing that person and we won't have our STEM position. So in that awesome narrative, ignore all that stuff, because the cuts came after that. It's also going to act, someone asked me earlier, and this reminded me today, this is going to impact our ability to act as a cooling and warming center, because we won't be open on Saturdays anymore. So we'll need, as a city, to find a place, whether it's downstairs here, whether it's somewhere that people can go to for that. And on top of that, just to be a real downer, since it's in the narrative, found out we didn't get that LSTA grant, so you can cross that out for the bookmobile as well. So we'll move on to someone happier, unless there's any other questions.
I have a question. How, is there a way to have, like, maybe keep 2 part-time that you did from the cut in here for library?
If you want to cut somewhere else.
So there's no way to do.
We spent counselor, Gerald.
Well, I mean, this is the first time I'm seeing this, so it's, you know, I'm trying to review it.
Well, I'll tell you a frustrating thing, because of the CC&E, the class comp and equity study. And if you look, last year, 481 was the personnel services for the library.
Right.
Year in.
And it went down.
And it went down to 430, so $50,000 is what we recognized out of we just reported out $120, $1,000 is what we thought we got, right? So it really only went down 50 in personnel, so.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the library, there's been so much growth there, and I just think so many people use that on a regular basis. It's kind of our community center right now, since we don't have one. And I think that one would be very detrimental to this community. It brings people together. I mean, it serves so many purposes. So I mean, I don't know where to cut from, but I feel pretty strongly that we need to do something with the library.
You can't,
I think that's where she was talking about at the beginning. There's 3 other funding sources. If you want to maintain that level of service, like the other agencies have done, you've got to start drawing on those. Because it's going to continue. The revenues from property taxes are going to go like this. The costs are going to go like this. So there's going to be an ever-expanding gap. So some agencies have just cut. Others have stepped up through their community and funded through alternative ways of funding it.
Do you
have alternative ways of funding?
We'll be talking about that in this coming year. I wasn't here 2 years ago.
Okay, so nothing that can be done tonight?
Nothing that can be done tonight. To give you a balanced budget, we have to.
Sam?
Sorry.
Yep, so we have a couple of cuts, fortunate, not
There are no personnel cuts at the museum. The biggest cuts that you will find are in training, and then in the equipment that we can purchase and exhibit development. So that will impact new permanent exhibits and temporary exhibits that we create, such as the Nesting with Osprey exhibit that we did this year. Things like that will be less.
Parks. Parks, so you see the projects listed in there, they're not actually coming out of the Parks Fund. We have 3 different locations that cover parks expenditures. There's the Parks Department Fund, which is operation and maintenance, mowing the grass, paying for the contractors to come out and do stuff, paying for the utilities for the parks, paying for personnel services. There's also a Parks Capital Reserve, and that's where we actually do projects. And then there's the Parks SDCs, which is a funding mechanism. So the projects are actually listed over there, but I wanted to put the projects that we'll be working on this next year in this so that you knew where the parks is at, because the projects can get kind of lost when you start bouncing around in my funds, because I have all of these different funds. So I wanted to keep that right up front. We'll be working on the Riverview Pathway Realignment Project. That's where the erosion is happening just past the bridge, where Ash Creek, the bank has started to slough off. To reinforce that bank, it would be very expensive and very time consuming because we have to go through permitting in order to do that. The best way to move forward and the least cost would be to move that pathway away from the embankment. And so that's what that project is for, is to realign it away from where the erosion is happening. We'll also be doing the Parks Master Plan update. The Parks Master Plan was done in 2015. This will be a complete relook, and for the community, it's an opportunity to look at it from 3 points of view. I like it just the way it is. Maybe some of the ideas that they had back then could be tweaked and made a little bit better. Maybe some refinements are done. Or you could just wipe the slate clean and start over and take a fresh look at the whole thing. So that's what that Parks Master Plan is going to be doing, and that'll start this next fiscal year, and it'll take probably about a year and a half, depending on the number of, because parks and transportation are probably the most attended master plans, because parks are sexy, they're fun, everybody loves parks, but that also includes additional time with public meetings and gathering public input and kind of filtering through that to come up with a master plan. So it's going to be a year and a half, 2 years. And then the Sunset Park improvement is going to kick off, I'm hoping later this month. We have our new engineer under contract. I sent him last week when I was at a conference late one evening. I sent him a request for scope of work to do the design and construction for it. We intend to have that project out to bid by the end of this year, first part, December, January, which is the optimal bidding time, and then get a contractor out there to start doing the construction for the nature play, tree planting, and all the other stuff. So we'll be working on the design for about the next 6-7 months.
And I want to clarify that Parks is in the general fund, but that Sunset Park is a grant. So that's not coming from the general fund, it's coming from grant funds.
Yeah, grant and system development charges.
So I have a question regarding rental income on the parks. So for example, the summer series, that comes from, I'm assuming, the tourism benefits. To kind of like summer series and all of that.
Yeah, that's.
But there's obviously an impact to the parks. Is it possible for the parks to get rented from?
Okay. There is a potential for
To
that.
help cover the impact of that.
One of the things that we did this year is for tourism and events, because my staff is paid for with street, sewer, water, storm, which means they're supposed to be working on street, sewer, water, storm. And a small portion of it is in parks. Mainly I have one person that does a lot of the parks. They're not funded to do events. However, Public Works does do a lot of work in events. I got to drive the truck bus here for me. So one of the things we looked at this year was to go ahead and any of our time through that software, any of our time that the staff works on an event, they actually bill the G&E versus street sewer water. So there's a better allocation, part of that transparency. So you know that the right money is being spent on the right things. But that's a good point. Rental income, we'll have to take a look at that.
You are now no longer Sean's favorite counselor.
But you might be Rob's favorite.
Yeah, Rob loves you right now.
Me and Sean, we'll work it out.
Did anybody else have any questions about parks? It's kind of, we're just kind of holding right now, and we actually did do some cuts to help offset what was happening in the rest of the general fund. Went through with my staff and chopped things out.
Before we jump to the next thing, I wanted to go backwards just a minute. We were talking about library and museum. Those are the two, they're unique in the city landscape because each of them has a 501c3 nonprofit group that does external support of that. We're not talking huge amounts of money, but it pays for things like summer reading and extra books on tape, CD, and so on. So what I'm getting to is if you see an event or an activity that's put on by either the Heritage Museum Society or the Friends of the Library, support it because that's a way of helping to fund those to particular city, parts of city.
Would they be able to, can they transfer money, essentially pay the city to help fund the position? Like the Friends of, would they be able to infuse cash into
three-part?
From the city's perspective, yes. I don't know what the legalities are.
You'd have to go back and volunteers, and I know the library maintains a very large complement of volunteers, as does the museum. It would have to go back to what the mission statement and the vision statement is for the two nonprofit groups. We are more likely to do things like funding special programs.
But the bylaws, the mission, the charter, that can all be changed. But do you know currently what the Heritage Museum Society, or you, Natasha, has in the bank?
About 10,000.
And the library has about 16, 17?
About 10,000.
Is that what it is now? Okay, but that's right, we just paid for summer reading and stuff. So we're not talking a lot of money, but if you want to find a way to help those two agencies without saying let's raise fees, watch for stuff happening that are supported by the nonprofit groups, or send them a check every month.
So even if they can't give money to the city directly for the city to pay for our position, could they not write grants so that they can hire somebody to cover some of the duties and responsibilities that were covered by the city? That could be explored.
As long as you keep in mind that everybody that staffs those nonprofits are volunteers.
Yeah.
And
are you willing to write the grant?
Well, and just to be clear, Sean's department, he handles the grant writer and grants, and Sean and Patrick have been working together to try and find grants to start to rebuild through grants, some of what had to be taken away. So we're not just taking it away and saying, okay, Patrick, you're on your own, bye-bye, have a good day. We're really looking at grant funding. We're hoping that in the discussions we have with the council that within a few years, we can put these positions back or do something. But those are deeper discussions that we can't fix tonight.
And Sean and Marshall have a great track record, but we have to look for sustainable grants.
Yes.
Well, as the budget is getting more competitive, those things that every community is fighting, so it's getting more competitive.
Very much so.
Do you have any other questions specific to Parks Commission? Can we talk about pool?
Pool, pretty easy one. I zeroed it out except for property insurance. And we're waiting for the process for the community center, whatever that vision comes out at. This will remain in here and just covering insurance for the property liability. So.
Just, this is kind of petty, but is the price the same now that there's not people there for that insurance?
Yeah, actually, prices for insurance is going up. Yeah. We can take a look with our insurance provider to say, okay, it's locked off, we're not gonna have anybody in there, maybe we can get it dropped down to a lower classification. Total is 2,400, but if I can get it down to 200.
Yeah, because I don't see liability in there.
Yeah, the liability can't go away.
The liability can't go away.
The property probably can't.
Yeah, for $1,300, I think somebody could do us a favor.
What is the
Joe.
What are the contract services? What's 25,000?
That was the YMCA. That did that.
Oh, I see, that's right,
And
and so
now
now
it's-
there's,
yeah,
gotcha.
They provided lifeguards.
Yeah.
And so we absorbed this into the general fund to help balance the general fund. So this money is just absorbed in. I mean, we absorbed everything we could to try to keep people and bring a balanced budget to you, so.
If you're not caught up, we're on page 52. This has some non-departmental general fund expenditures. There's only 4 lines really that have numbers in them. 2 of them are the museum payment. And then a transfer for urban renewal debt service, that's for this building, our share of it. And then the contingency, which is set by policy.
Yeah, it starts out at like, I think 16% of general fund expenditures. And then there was a small amount added to that, just in balancing some rounding stuff. Oh, great, it's Gerald.
Public Works.
Here we go.
Thanks, Rob.
Gerald, I would like, as your chair, I would like to say that we're approaching 8:30 rapidly. We're within 5 minutes of 8:30, so it's 2 hours and my brain is about to shut down. So if we can get through yours as quickly as we could, I'd appreciate that.
I'm more than happy to truncate as much as you'd like. I've listed a whole bunch of information here about projects and what we manage and maintain. Do you have any questions?
I love your reports. Thank you.
So thorough. They are.
So,
I have just some revenue things that I'll flip through real quick. Transportation fund, beginning fund balance, we're gonna be down 168,000 from last year. Some of these that I talked about is because we're doing projects or other things, costs have gone up. Flip over here to sewer. You'll see a big jump in sewer. That's because we got a $2 million grant to do one of the phase 2 and 3 of the 9th Street pump station. That money didn't get spent last year. It's carried over into this year, which is why you see that big jump. And then we'll work on that project and it's going to drop back down. But I did a calculation that we actually reduced our beginning fund balance. We take that out by about 1.27 million. It's because we're doing work. And then on water, it increased by 824,000 due to delays in some water projects. There's kind of a trickle effect with the master plan and then doing the other ones. I would love to be started on the water treatment plant now, but I have to have the other plans in place to justify doing the project. And then stormwater, we decreased beginning fund balance by 72,000. We really don't have projects in there, but we haven't changed really our rates. We actually adjusted them down to an inflationary index going forward. So it's like 3% increase this year, but only on one of the things. I think it was 10 cents per month per household. So I have a whole litany of capital projects. We're going to be working a lot in sewer and water. It's going to be sewer, water, and that's going to be going on probably for about the next 3 to 5 years. So you'll get sick of sewer and water, I guarantee you. But they're critical projects to help the community get through the next 20 years. You've got to have water and you have to treat sewer, and that's the big projects we're going to be doing. So.
Okay, questions for Gerald?
No questions for Gerald on Public Works? Where are we now?
Page 7.
What page?
Okay, I was like, wait, I've got one too many.
Page 7.
Okay, there we go.
So we're moving into special revenue funds. I just want to clarify, I had forgotten that we set up facilities as a separate fund. It's not within general fund. So take that back, put it in here, and then go for it, Sean.
So this one's pretty straightforward. We tend to just kind of budget a placeholder figure each year for a facade grant and an economic development loan, a small business loan, just in case this comes around. You'll see last year we did the same thing and we did not do either of those things, so the money just continues to accrue and build up. That's pretty much the only news for this fund.
And tourism and events?
Tourism events, this is the happy-go-lucky fund.
Let me back up, I think Jessica has a
Oh, sorry.
question.
I'm sorry, it's not a question to you, Sean. I've only kind of just heard through the birdies that we're trying to do this in one meeting. As far as I know, this meeting always ended at 8:30 and I had an exit at home. So are we trying to do all of this tonight? Or do we need to add a second meeting to the
So
agenda?
we have an opportunity, Karen, we have an opportunity to have a second meeting with the date certain. Yes, we do.
As you'll notice on your agenda, at the end of the meeting, you can either call for an adjournment or you can call for a recess, declaring a date and time certain to hold a meeting. And the agenda noted, because the same date as the budget calendar of next Wednesday, the 17th at 6:30.
So it would be my recommendation that we get through the last of the department head reports briefly, quickly, and then we call for recess. Once we're through the department head reports, I'll pull the audience, so to speak, committee, and we can go from there.
Karen, can we do the URA at the next meeting, or must we do the URA at this meeting?
Well, no. We would need to, I would think because it's a separate meeting, I would think we would need to do it tonight because it was advertised to be tonight.
Yeah. So at least open it and then
Open
set
it
it
and close it.
date certain.
Tourism events.
Tourism events, all of our various summer events are in this fund. You'll see sources and expenses, as well as a lot of the other downtown related things that we do. I think major changes were, we kind of talked about a lot of the money from this is going to support different aspects of city operations. We did bump up programs a fair bit, because again, we're trying to continue to grow that sort of the visitation and programming for community members. And also, as I said, we're trying to kind of slowly wean off of the ARPA money. So for example, the scratch-its, we're gonna look to kind of shift a little bit of that into the tourism events fund so we can begin, continue that on. Things like Touch a Truck, other types of programming to kind of do fun things and also encourage visitors to spend more money in the community. That's really kind of where the programming money is gonna go. And then advertising and marketing, again, kind of similar. We now that we have some money to do this kind of work, we're gonna do some targeted ads. We're gonna try to drive traffic to our Experience City website, do a photo shoot and a video for content to put out there, all just kind of try to continue to bring people to our community and increase the customer base for our local businesses. And I think that's probably enough for my piece.
Sean, I got two questions. The royalties for the event center, hotel still running the show here. Are they actually filling these rooms on a regular basis?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Can you walk me through the Independence Days numbers? I'm suspecting the first two numbers in the first two columns are COVID affected kind of numbers.
Yeah, the 2021 and the 21-22. Yeah, that is, so the earliest ones, those are the COVID numbers.
So you expect to pay that, you expect to put out that kind of money for Independence Days?
120,000?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
That's pretty standard.
Yeah, we.
I've never seen what the city pays for Independence Days. I've only heard stories about what we
It's
get.
definitely gone up.
Okay,
Yeah, it's definitely gone up because we hire security now.
Yeah.
We don't get enough volunteer
Yeah.
police, so.
There's also.
Don't they already have a working budget or no?
Yes.
They're a city fund, so you see they budget to have a source of 120 and also to spend 120, so they're self-supporting in the budget.
Yeah, and the committee has its own sort of budget breakdown that they work off of. And yeah, definitely working to balance that. I'd say that's something that we've been pretty good at, particularly this last year, was creating new revenue sources so that event does fully pay for itself.
But this is handled more in-house now than it used to be in a more separated and private committee.
Yes, I mean, there's a committee, there's a number of city staff on it. We do still rely on volunteers for many things.
It just used to have less city presence in it.
less city oversight.
Yes, and the cash flow is absolutely running through the city
Yes.
and monitored.
Yes.
Yes.
Looks like the sources and the expenses though balance out though.
Yes.
Yep.
Page 73, grants fund. So this fund was established a couple of years ago, and this is expected grants, or hopeful grants, and then you'll also see them as a use. So this helps us in the departments not have a lot of fluctuation by getting a big grant and then not getting it the next year, and it looks like we're spending a lot more or a lot less within our departments. It also has all of the ARPA money that still hasn't been expended in it, budgeted for next year.
Yeah, and I will tell you that the account numbering in the grants fund was challenging, and we're still working out some of those details. So I appreciate your comments about, having these numbers be somewhat consistent. We're working on that with the grants.
Facilities, vehicle, and equipment. This is a concerted effort to house all of the operation and maintenance of the buildings in one location so that we're able to completely track what we're doing in this building, the museum, and the library, and the arts center for maintenance, short-term or annual, and then long-term maintenance too. What it did is it kind of took that burden off of other departments to have to figure out what they needed to maintain. It all is housed in here. The staff has just moved from one department over into this and is fully focused on maintaining and operating the buildings so that we can do what we do. Any questions?
Page 77, then, general fund equipment and vehicle reserve fund is actually scheduled to be closed this year into the new fund.
Yeah.
So there's nothing proposed for next year.
And then information services, I pretty much already covered this, but that's where a lot of the software subscriptions used to live. They're now broken out into all the various departments. You won't see much else in here this year. Normally, if we're doing a large upgrade that's very costly, that's where projects like that would be in this one.
That's also where the hotel revenue for these rentals comes. The first $5,000 that they make comes to us.
Yeah.
Capital project funds has to do with projects that are related to the streets. Most recent one was the F Street Bridge. And we have cleanup of that and a couple other projects that we're anticipating may move forward. So I have money in there to cover that if those projects do move forward.
And thank you for the rapid response on the F Street cleanup. Much appreciated by those of us that live in here.
We wanted to get out there faster, but the rain just would not stop.
Yes, yes.
So the next brief section, I can handle this very briefly, is the debt service section. We currently budget 3 funds in this section: the general obligation bond fund, these are the voter approved bonds. The Minnet debt service, which everybody knows, that's the debt that the city owes in regards to the infrastructure there. And the special assessments fund, which is used to do local improvement district type projects where the property owners are then assessed for the benefits received, and they pay for that either upfront or over time. That fund captures those that are paid over time. What I'd like to tell you is that staff plans to bring a report to the council after the beginning of the new fiscal year with respect to debt, and sort of a summary and analysis, if you will, of kind of where we stand and what the plan is going forward. But this budget meets the legal requirements for what we need to levy for those GO bonds, and then captures the activity, the scheduled debt service payments, if you will, on the Minnet and the special assessments funds.
Any questions there?
Okay, so I'm gonna, just by a quick show of hands, how many would like to recess this meeting and begin next week again? Okay, I need a motion to recess. Do I need a motion to recess?
Yes. Move to recess to a date and time certain, being
May 17th.
May 17th, 2023 at 6:30 PM.
Second.
Motion by Kathy, second by Jessica, or was it second by Kate? Jessica, okay. You're both so quiet over there. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. At this time, I would like to move us over to the Urban Renewal Agency. Call to order, we're all still here. Correct?
In spirit.
In spirit. So we can, if I heard everything correctly, we can open this meeting and then a motion to immediately recess, correct?
So move to recess to time and date certain, Wednesday, the 17th at 6:30, or following the conclusion of the budget meeting.
What she said, I second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Karen, feel free to clean
Any
that up.
abstain?
Point of order before you leave? You're done, right?
I am done, but the one thing is if we have any questions, we need
That's it.
those
That's my
in.
point of order. I will take the questions like Gloria normally did. So if
Okay.
you have questions, please email them to me and I will find the right person to answer them prior to the next meeting.
So you want those in by Monday noon?
Talking. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Monday noon.
Love it. Monday noon.
And please bring everything back with you next week, including the little sheets that have the motions on there, in case you get.
In name tags.
Huh?
In name tags.
Oh, yeah.
Bring them.
Or just leave them here.
Yeah.